Good morning, class. This is Mr. Harris, and welcome to this week's lecture. We're going to be looking more at personality, special of social learning theory, and a little bit about gender. So let's get started. So the first thing I have in front of you guys is actually a chart that was created looking at how men and women typically describe colors. The first thing you'll notice is that on the right-hand side, men have very few color words compared to women. Now, what could the reason for this be? Now, I'm kind of setting the stage here for a little bit of evolutionary psychology. So, we do know that men and women have biological differences. And one of the differences, it turns out, is an acuity to tell the difference between different colors. Now, why would women be superior at telling colors from men? Scientists believe this goes back to when women were responsible for gathering stuff from the environment, and knowing the difference in shade between a poisonous plant and a healthy one could be very good. So men weren't as good as this. But what are men better at? Obviously, physical size, strength, coordination, those things. So there definitely is a physical component to the differences in gender, but we're going to also talk a little bit about what is not a physical component. This next one is examples of some word clouds that were made by females and males on social media. I think you can guess which ones are which, but if we look at the female ones, okay, a lot more about positivity, a lot more strung out words, excitement. You see boyfriend, family, friends, cute, baby, adorable, happy. If we look down at men, not as much fun. Fight, battle, a lot of video games, some cursing in there as well, things talking about sports. So this is looking at obviously a little mental difference of how men and women choose to display themselves online. So gender role development. Gender is the cultural, social, and psychological meanings associated with masculinity and femininity. And gender roles are the various traits designed either masculine or feminine in a given culture. And your gender identity is a person's psychological, not physiological, psychological sense of being male or female. Between the ages of 2 and 3, children can identify themselves and other children as boys or girls. The concept of gender or sex, however, based more on outward characteristics such as clothing when you are young. So we look here at this chart made by Money and Earhart, who were psychologists back in the 1970s. You're either born biologically male or female, although there are some people who are born intersex, and then you are socially labeled as such, and then you get different treatment. Then people interact with you differently based upon your social label, and that interacts with well as your biological factors, your hormones, which tend to bring out different kinds of behavior. So the social label and the different treatment are still very relevant to how you're going to act later on. So some basic gender differences. These are all generalizations. Tyler girls tend to play more of dolls and ask for more help than boys. Tyler boys tend to play more of trucks and wagons and to play more actively. After age 3 years, we see consistent gender differences in preferred toys and activities. And children are more rigid in sex role stereotypes than adults. Children will call each other out at a young age for not acting in the proper, I put that in quotation marks, role. So I want to talk quickly about one psychologist whose work is really important in this field, and that's a guy named Albert Bandura. And Bandura is the big social learning theory guy. And he did an experiment back in the day with a Bobo doll. And a Bobo doll is just a kind of a blow up thing with a clown on it. And it's one of those ones that's weighted at the bottom. So if you punch it, it falls over, but it pops right back up. It's kind of like a little punching bag. And what Bandera did in his experiments is he would have children watch adults either play nicely with the Bobo doll or be mean to the Bobo doll, hit it and beat it up. He would then let those children go in and choose what they wanted to do with the Bobo doll. The children who saw the adults being violent and rough were also violent and rough with the Bobo doll themselves. So this shows how we learn from watching others. And this is very important because we spend a lot of time watching other people, especially through television. And can kids tell if something's real or fake? It depends on what age group they are in. Okay. So according to social learning theory, children are encouraged to do the appropriate sex type activities by the following. The parents tell them traditional roles they feed to their children, traditional families. The media, okay, movies, cartoons, music, portrays traditional gender roles for females and males. Females still place in traditional domestic or inside the home setting. And in schools, they transmit the information of gender role stereotypes to children as well. So, social learning theory, gender roles are acquired through the basic process of learning, including reinforcement, punishment, and modeling. We learn gender. If you act like like society thinks you should act as a little boy, you get rewarded for it. If you act like a little girl, you might get punished for it. And we see these all the time in senselessly gendered products. This is one of my favorite examples. We have earplugs for women and then earplugs for men. You see a skull on the male side, screw 'em in your ears. While for the women, soft, gentle, and of course, the color that lets you know it's for women, it's pink. We also have boys and girls laptops. And if you notice this one, the boys' laptop actually has double the functions and is slightly more expensive than the female laptop. We have men's tea and women's tea, which again, I don't understand. And tough guy for a little snake, a little snacks, and then little princess, little snacks. So we see all this gendering that happens a lot, especially for younger. Okay. Now, there's one more person we're going to think about when it comes to personality, and we're going to go back to Freud. Okay. Now, we remember early on in the year, we learned all about Freud and his idea of consciousness, and that we are actually made up of three things: our id, our ego, and our superego. Okay. The ego is kind of the person that gets represented in society, how you act in public. Your superego is that kind of police force or morality that stops you from doing bad things. And the id is your animalistic desires. Okay, so again, the id is the primitive, unconscious reservoir that houses the basic motives, drives, and instinctive desires that determine our personalities. Always acts on impulse and seeks immediate pleasure. Okay, and it's present all the way from superego is the police responsible for morals and values. It comes from the rules that you've learned from external experiences, the inner voice of shoulds and should nots. Austin conflicts with the id because the id wants what feels good and the superego wants what's right and is more. And finally, you have the ego, which regulates the conflict between the id and the superego. Um, this is the rational part of your brain. The ego must figure out a way to satisfy one's desires while not violating one moral code. When this balance becomes upset, conflicted thoughts and behaviors that signify a mental disorder may be a result. Okay? So Freud came up with this theory of defense mechanisms. And this is a term you've probably heard in regular language before. And it said the purpose of these defense mechanisms was to prevent you from connecting, knowing your its desires, protect you from the anxiety of confronting your own weaknesses. So this is all about protecting your own idea of who you are. So the first one is denial. And this is when someone simply refuses to acknowledge the truth. I don't have a problem. That didn't happen. We've got repression, which is when you push something down and forget something bad. Not remembering childhood abuse, forgetting your doctor's appointment, not remembering an accident. Regression, which is reverting back to childhood coping mechanisms when confronted with stress, pretty much going back to being a little kid, an adult sucking their thumb, waiting for your parents to solve your problems, adult coloring, which is becoming more and more popular these days. Displacement, which is when you take your anger out on something other than what is really bothering you. For an example, kicking your dog when you're angry at something else, yelling at your mom when she asks you how your day was. So displacing your anger in a different way. Projection, thinking that others are criticizing you when they are not being critical. They are your worries, anxieties about yourself. You're not theirs. You think I'm dumb, don't you? But I wasn't talking. They're the ones talking. I would never cheat. Okay, these are people who are going to say what they think about themselves and project it on others. The next one is rationalization, which is explaining something away, usually by blaming somebody else. I failed because, okay, I failed the test because my teacher is mean, not because I didn't study. It's always someone else's fault, or there's always a reason why things are not going the way you want them to. Sublimation, which is taking hostile or sexual feelings and placing them in something socially acceptable, okay? And we're gonna have we're gonna have you guys this week read about some of these and do a little bit of this in practice.